before you again tonight for the second affirmative. I'm reminded of a debate between Paul Ferguson and David Harkrider, which David Harkrider brought Paul Ferguson a snake to pick up to prove that he believed in the miraculous gifts of the Spirit. One of the funny things about it was that Paul Ferguson constantly referred to the snake as Smokey. Smokey the snake. Don't be confused by the smoke screen that's going on. Now, I guess just to prove a point, to show you that I, honest to God, do not believe that this is, I'll even tilt it with my gangster lean, that this is not what Paul was talking about in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 4. I will put it on. If I put it straight, I feel a little bit like Trump, okay? Okay? All right? Okay? Now, I hope that's long enough because Sister Weatherly will tell you, I don't wear ball caps. God only made a few perfect heads, so I don't like to cover it up unless it's cold outside. That was pretty. If he wants me to preach and read a scripture, just to show you that I do not think that this. You know what? When the apostles went to the temple at the hour of prayer, Brother Hayes in his book admits that those people at the temple wore a prayer shawl on top of their head. Those apostles in Acts chapter 3 wouldn't have been allowed in the temple to pray at the hour of prayer unless they put that prayer shawl on top of their head. Paul was not talking about something on top of your head. This is all not a hat. He's talking about something that hangs down from the head. Now, the whole context deals with something that can be shorn or shaven. So it's not talking about this hat at all. So Brother Hayes said, he started his affirmative and said that I'll put it back on in just a second just to shut you up. Hold on. Brother Hayes said that he thought that he was in the affirmative tonight, and then I came out with all these affirmative arguments. Well, I thought I was in the affirmative last night, and I didn't introduce any church history in my affirmative arguments, but his negative arguments were at least 75% church history. He says that I didn't really put up his charts. Okay, I didn't put up his charts because I have a flow to my speech. I can say 10 words to every one of his, and I don't want to slow down having to wait on someone to put up a chart. He put up about 4 or 5 charts in his first speech. I dealt with at least 3 of them. His chart number 12, he dealt with translations. Well, what about this translation here? You know, the NIV, in a footnote of 1 Corinthians 11:4-7, they offer the footnote. Every man who prays or prophesies with long hair dishonors his head. Every woman who prays or prophesies with no covering of hair on her head dishonors her head. She is one like of the shorn women. If a woman has no covering, let her be for now with short hair. But since it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair shorn or shaven, she should grow it again. A man ought not to have long hair. So not only do I agree that this is not what it was talking about, at least the translators of the NIV in their footnotes agreed with that. He brought up the ALJC. He brought up a couple of our precious saints, Saint Seagrave, Saint Bernard. They're not here tonight. They can answer for themselves. I don't know Brother Bernard personally. I don't know Brother Seagraves personally. I know what, I can tell you this, they don't agree with his position at all. Neither does A.T. Robertson. A.T. Robertson, he keeps bringing him back up. I told you last night, he was a Southern Baptist. He did not believe that a veil was a required covering. He taught that it was a custom in that time and that there was no required covering to this day. So he can say these people agree with him, but they don't. Now, when he brought up A.T. Robertson in his chart on 1 Corinthians 11:6, he talked about the middle voice and the imperative, and he said that what A.T. Robertson was saying is that a woman should continuously veil herself. You don't believe that. You believe that a woman should temporarily veil herself. So if it's talking about a continuous covering, then brother, that's what I agree. That's what I believe it's talking about. Let's look at my chart 77 real quick. See, one of the problems that Brother Hayes has is that when he sees the word veil, he automatically thinks that means a covering material like a handkerchief or something, but that's not the case. The Oxford English Dictionary defines veil as cover with or as if with a veil. Webster Dictionary says to cover, provide, obscure with, or as if with a veil. Dean Alford, who was one of the American Standard translators, he even said, nature herself, the mere fact of one sex being by nature unveiled, that is, having short hair, the other veiled, having long hair. So the word veil in and of itself does not mean some kind of napkin that you put on top of your head. And so there are Greek scholars that agree with this position. For example, Phil Brown, who is a professor of language at a Bible college in Cincinnati, Ohio. He says if a woman does not have uncut hair, let her shear the rest off. But since it is a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her allow her hair to grow uncut. Now let's go back to some of the things that we mentioned that Brother Hayes did not even begin to get into. 1 Corinthians 11:5, he says that this praying or prophesying means that it's only to be done in the church assembly. It's not. He didn't touch anything about whether this is a conditional clause or an incidental statement. He didn't touch anything about if this is a conditional clause, what other passages are a conditional clause. Now I want you to get this. 1 Corinthians 11:6-7. If the woman be not covered, let her also be shorn. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered. Is it a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven only when she prays or prophesies? Notice this, since the dishonor of being uncovered is directly linked to the shame of being shorn or shaven, you cannot say that the covering is only required when she prays or prophesies. By the same token, you'd have to say that it's a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven only when she prays or prophesies. If not, why not? For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and glory of God. Is the man the image and glory of God only when he prays or prophesies? The obvious answer is no. Thus, the covering is not limited to only when a person prays or prophesies. Paul didn't say, be covered only when you pray or prophesy. It's an incidental statement. It's not a conditional clause. I showed you that Paul did not limit prayer to the church assembly. He said, I will therefore that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands. I showed you from Acts chapter 21 that prophesying was not limited to a church service. They were just gathered together in this guy's house, and his virgin daughters prophesied. When Paul dealt with something that specifically took place in the church, he said in 1 Corinthians, when you are gathered together, 1 Corinthians 5:4. He said, if therefore the whole church come together, 1 Corinthians 14:23. Paul wasn't dealing strictly with a congregational worship service in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Prayer and prophesying are not limited to the church service. What did he say about 1 Timothy 2:8? He said that this is not dealing with the church service. Really? 1 Timothy 2:8 says, I will therefore that men pray everywhere. Does the church service include everywhere? I will therefore that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands. In like manner also, that connects the two. So everywhere includes the church. It includes, like Paul said, everywhere. So what is Paul worried about women having braided hair in the context of prayer if they're supposedly were wearing veils on their head? How would he have known they had braided hair? Likewise, Peter said, whose adorning let it not be the outward adorning of plaiting the hair. And it is in the context of prayer. Verse 7, he's talking about prayer. If a woman had a veil on her head, the outward adorning would be her veil, not her braided hair. Peter said, whose adorning let it not be the outward adorning of plaiting the hair. Obviously, she didn't have anything on her head. Otherwise, the outward adorning would not be her hair. He hasn't touched top side, bottom side, inside, or outside of my argument on false antithesis. His idea that if a woman doesn't wear a veil, she might as well cut her hair short. It's not only illogical, it's asinine. It doesn't even make any sense whatsoever. So I introduced to you that in 1 Corinthians 11:15, Paul said that hair is given to a woman in the place of a veil. But Brother Hayes explains this passage as, just as the hair represents her proper covering in the natural realm, so also the veil is the Christian woman's proper liturgical covering. And I showed you the difference between the two. Paul is not making a just as, so also statement. Those statements are found all throughout the New Testament. Jesus said, just as Moses lifted up the snake, so also the Son of Man will be lifted up. Kathos hutos. He said in Luke 11:30, just as Jonah became a sign, so also the Son of Man will be. Kathos huto. Just as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the days of the Son of Man. Kathos huto. Paul uses this phrase several times in his epistles. He used it in 2 Corinthians 1:5. For as the suffering of Christ overfloweth to us, so our comfort overflows through Christ. If Paul had meant, so as nature gives you one thing, just as nature gives you one thing, so also you're supposed to wear a veil, he could have very well used this kathos huto language that he did in other passages. And you know where you're not going to find it? You're not going to find it in 1 Corinthians 11:13 through 15. When Paul asked the question, is it proper for a woman to pray unto God uncovered, Paul clarified that a woman's hair is given to her for a covering or instead of a covering. So I mentioned to you that the Greek text says instead of a covering, and in fact there are various Greek interlinears, and notice how they translate it. Englishman Greek New Testament, for the long hair instead of a covering is given to her. The interlinear Greek English New Testament, for the hair of the head instead of a wrap is given to her. Today's parallel Greek English New Testament, for the long hair instead of a covering is given to her. George Ricker Berry, Greek English interlinear, for the long hair instead of a covering is given to her. So in 1 Corinthians 11:15, Paul did not make a just as one thing, so also another statement. In fact, he said one thing is given in the place of another thing. And when A is given in the place of B, A takes the place of B. Long hair is given to her instead of a covering. All that is required is her long hair. We might illustrate it like this. 4 quarters are given for or ante $1. You can say 4 quarters ante $1 are given to him. We could say 4 quarters for a $1 bill are given to him. We could say 4 quarters as a $1 bill are given to him. We could even say 4 quarters instead of $1 are given to him. We could say 4 quarters in the place of $1 are given to him. We could even say 4 quarters to serve as $1 are given to him. In each scenario, 4 quarters have taken the place or assumed the place of a $1 bill. In every case, do you know what that person has been given? 4 quarters. He hasn't been given 4 quarters and a $1 bill. He has been given 4 quarters for or instead of a $1 bill. When we apply this same concept to 1 Corinthians 11:15, long hair ante a veil is given to her. Long hair for a veil is given to her. Long hair as a veil is given to her. Long hair instead of a veil is given to her. Long hair in the place of a veil is given to her. Or long hair to serve as a veil is given to her. No matter how you translate it, it's just like with the 4 quarters. The scenario is the same. The woman's long hair assumes the place of the veil. And all that is required of the woman is what has been given to her, and that is her long hair. How much time do I have left? 5 minutes. Woo! Let's keep on hashing it out. Let's see here. I want to go back to this antithesis argument because I want to show you and knuckle this down about how illogical his understanding of 1 Corinthians 11:6 is. If a woman doesn't wear a veil, she might as well cut her hair short. Do you see what he did again in his first speech about Paul wouldn't say, Paul, the most educated apostle, he wouldn't say if a woman cuts her hair, she might as well cut her hair. I agree. That's not what he's saying at all. I dealt with that last night. I showed that he doesn't even believe that. I played you chart 50 of the video of him where he said that to be shorn means to crop it off close to the skin. What Paul's saying is, if you cut your hair at all, you might as well cut it short. One act to a more severe act. So he's given the illustration. If you're going to do A, you might as well do B. And B is a shame, so don't even do A. But his understanding is a false antithesis. It makes about as much sense as saying if you don't wear sunglasses, you might as well shave your eyebrows. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. An example of a true antithesis is that if you steal a piece of bubble gum, you might as well rob a bank. We have equal relationship on both sides. Stealing a piece of bubble gum, stealing one thing, robbing a bank, stealing something even greater. And since it's a felony to rob a bank, don't even steal a piece of bubble gum. That's the way we would teach our children. We would teach these ladies on holiness. If a woman goes out in a halter top, she might as well go out naked. We got partial nudity, we've got full nudity. We've got equal relationship on both sides. It's balanced, it's equal relationships on both sides of the antithesis. It's logical and it's valid. So the argument is, if a woman be not covered, if a